I want to welcome Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney Vanita Gupta and thank the Justice Department's recognition for our reform efforts. I also want to acknowledge Police Commissioner Kevin Davis, Baltimore City Council President Jack Young as well. Today marks an important step on our path to reform. With the release of its finding report, the Justice Department is sharing with the community, with the city government, and with our police department the conclusions of its 14-month-long investigation, an inquiry that I asked for last May. The findings are challenging to hear, but let me be clear. I never sugarcoat our problems, nor will I run away from our most pressing challenges. The report identifies specific problems in the department, but the transparency of the report offers a crucial foundation if we are going to move forward, because I believe transparency is the only true foundation upon which we can rebuild community trust. Policing issues have taken on a new urgency in the national discussion in light of the tragic shootings in recent weeks, as well as the developments in our own city. It's so very important that we get this right. The report's assessment and its follow-up to it will help us to heal the relationship between the police and our communities. I also want to be clear that we have not been standing still while this inquiry was underway. Indeed, some of these reforms began before I asked the Department of Justice to investigate the department. The city has taken first steps in a long path to reform, and we've begun to see real benefits. Our police department is already making significant changes. The community is providing valuable insights, and officers and citizens are working together to improve our communities and the policing that is happening within them. We have a very long journey ahead of us, and I'm grateful that we could begin this process of meaningful change while I'm mayor. I'd like to turn it over now to Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General Vanita Gupta. Ms. Gupta. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to start by thanking Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake and Commissioner Kevin Davis for their cooperation and for their leadership throughout the Justice Department's investigation. I also want to thank my outstanding team from the Civil Rights Division for their tireless and focused efforts. 15 months ago, in the aftermath of Freddie Gray's tragic death, we talked to community members, police officers, police union leaders, and city officials about the challenges related to policing in the city of Baltimore. The mayor, members of the city council, members of Congress, and residents asked us to open a pattern or practice investigation into the Baltimore Police Department, which we launched last May of 2015. Since then, we talked to residents in every corner of Baltimore, from Roland Park to Sandtown. We interviewed command staff and rank and file officers. We participated in ride-alongs in each police district. We met with leaders of police unions, religious organizations, advocacy groups, neighborhood associations, and reviewed their reports and publications. With law enforcement and statistical experts, we reviewed thousands of pages of documents covering 2010 to 2016, including policies and training materials, internal affairs data on stop searches and arrests, and use of force reports. And nearly everyone who spoke to us, from the Baltimore City Fraternal Order of Police, who showed us their 2012 report, Blueprint for Improved Policing, to the residents who shared serious concerns, everyone agreed that the Baltimore Police Department needs sustainable reform. Indeed, the mayor and the commissioner have been aware of the problems that our findings report details and have not stood still during our investigation, and I want to commend them for that. We recognize the challenges that are faced by police officers in Baltimore and other communities around the country. Every day, police officers risk their lives to uphold the law and keep our communities safe. Investigatory stops, arrests, and indeed at times force are all necessary tools used by BPD officers to do their jobs and to protect the safety of themselves and all of us. Providing policing services in many parts of Baltimore is particularly challenging, where residents and officers regularly confront complex social and economic challenges rooted in poverty, racial segregation, deficient educational, employment, and housing opportunities. Baltimore residents, just like Baltimore police officers, want to address these challenges. They want to fight crime, and they want to ensure public safety. And our guide to policing amidst these realities must be the Constitution and federal anti-discrimination law. Today, the Department of Justice announces the outcome of our investigation and issues a 163-page report detailing our findings. We conclude that there is reasonable cause to believe that BPD engages in a pattern or practice of conduct that violates the Constitution and federal anti-discrimination law. BPD engages in a pattern or practice of making unconstitutional stops, searches, and arrests, using enforcement strategies that produce severe and unjustified disparities in the rates of stops, searches, and arrests of African Americans, using excessive force, and retaliating against people engaging in constitutionally protected expression. These violations have deeply eroded the mutual trust between BPD and the community it serves, trust that is essential to effective policing as well as to officer and public safety. The problems in Baltimore didn't happen overnight or appear in a day. The pattern or practice that we found results from long-standing systemic deficiencies in the BPD. The agencies failed to provide officers with sufficient policy guidance and training to collect and analyze data of officer activities and to hold officers accountable for misconduct. BPDs failed to provide officers with the necessary equipment and resources they need to do police safely, constitutionally, and effectively. But these systemic failures alone didn't cause the problem. The police department's zero-tolerance street enforcement strategy became a quest to produce large numbers of enforcement actions, pedestrian stops in particular, often without enough consideration of their limited impact on solving crime and their caustic damage to community relationships. With today's city leaders, and while today's city's leaders have recognized these issues, many in the BPD continue to follow this strategy. Only 3.7% of the police department's more than 300,000 pedestrian stops from January 2010 to May of 2015 resulted in officers issuing a citation or making an arrest. Many of these stops and the resulting frisks lacked constitutional justification, and many of the discretionary arrests were simply street clearing activities. Supervisors at BPD Central Booking and local prosecutors rejected over 11,000 charges made by BPD officers because they lacked probable cause or otherwise did not merit prosecution. The city's African American residents and African American neighborhoods bore the brunt of this activity. Out of the data we surveyed, the police department made roughly 44% of its stops in two small, predominantly African American districts that contain only 11% of the city's population. African Americans accounted for 95% of the 410 individuals the police department stopped at least 10 times. Indeed, one African American man was stopped 30 times in less than 4 years, with none of the stops resulting in a citation or a criminal charge. We also found a pattern or practice of excessive force. For example, officers frequently resorted to physical force when a person did not immediately respond to verbal commands, even where the person was posing no imminent threat to the officer or others. Officers were ending up in unnecessarily violent confrontations with people in with mental health disabilities. We have seen communities throughout the country that improved policies and enhanced training and de-escalation and dealing with people in crisis can actually enhance officer safety and reduce the need for force. BPD also violates the First Amendment by retaliating against individuals engaged in constitutionally protected activities. Officers frequently detain and arrest members of the public for engaging in speech that officers perceive to be critical or disrespectful. And BPD officers use force against members of the public who are engaging in protected speech. Finally, although this pattern or practice investigation did not review the specific circumstances surrounding Freddie Gray's death, we did investigate BPD's transport practices. And our report identifies concerns about the safety risks and lack of data in BPD's transport practices. We also identified deficiencies in the way that BPD investigates sexual assaults. Policing that violates the Constitution or federal law severely undermines community trust, and blanket assumptions or stereotypes about certain neighborhoods can lead to resentment of the police. And resentment can prevent the type of effective policing that is needed to keep communities and officers safe. We found incident reports that documented how witnesses wouldn't share basic information with officers. We read several reports where the person who had originally called the police or needed assistance refused to cooperate after becoming upset by the police response. And when residents don't trust the police, the distrust makes it harder for officers to prevent and solve crimes. Proactive policing does not have to lead to these consequences. When the community trusts the police, residents work with law enforcement to ensure public safety. Effective proactive policing is community policing. It requires a different set of tactics than those employed by Baltimore for many years. Proactive policing requires officers and residents solving problems to build trust and reduce crime. And I'd like to now take this opportunity to speak directly to the men and women of the Baltimore Police Department. We know that the vast majority of officers in the Baltimore Police Department work hard. They work hard to provide vital services to the community and to abide by the Constitution and federal law. We have seen you run toward danger to protect the community you serve, and we are grateful. We also know that to do your job well, to meet the highest standards of the profession, you need clear policies, you need state-of-the-art training. You need to be supported by today's technology. In the 21st century, that means computers in your cars and other modern equipment to do your job well. You need to have adequate staffing and material resources to get the job done. And you need to know that you will be recognized for the work that you do and treated fairly when your work is challenged. In Baltimore, we see a city that is filled with vibrant, strong communities invested in their future. It's a city that's really determined to engage in the tough but vital work that's needed to build reform. And already Baltimore has begun to build that foundation for reform. The police department has initiated changes to its policies, training, data management, and accountability systems. These are really positive developments and a testament to the mayor and to Commissioner Davis's leadership. To help support these changes during our investigation, the Justice Department's Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services and Office of Justice Programs provided federal resources as well as technical assistance to the Baltimore Police Department, city officials, and community leaders. I want to applaud and commend city officials for their collaborative and cooperative partnership. The Justice Department and the city have entered an agreement in principle that identifies the types of reforms that we plan to address as we prepare to negotiate a court-enforceable, independently monitored consent decree. And by entering into this agreement in principle, the city and the police department have shown their commitment to moving forward expeditiously. The agreement in principle is just a framework. In the coming months, we're going to be using this framework to negotiate a comprehensive consent decree with the city. And in the coming days and weeks ahead, the Justice Department will be meeting with and reaching out to community members and law enforcement to hear their ideas, your ideas about the kind of police department you want to see in your community. And we need the energy of this entire community to help us craft those details in our consent decree and to drive real and lasting change in the city. And so we urge all of you to remain engaged. Whether in Baltimore or around the country, police reform won't happen overnight or by chance. These problems were not created overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to require focused effort and a sustained commitment. In communities across America, even in communities where trust has been broken, we have seen transformative reform rebuild relationships and advance public safety. And in the days ahead, because of the proactive leadership in the city, because of the energy and vibrancy of this community, and because of the police department's desire for reform, together we can shape that same progress right here in Baltimore. Together we can build a stronger Baltimore, a Baltimore that protects the rights, safety, and dignity of all. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, I want to thank the Deputy Assistant Attorney General. So in consultation with policing experts and stakeholders in the community, we have revised 26 key policies, including the department's important use of force policy. We're now training all of our officers on these new policies, and we've held additional trainings on key issues that the Justice Department has identified. We are revamping our approach to officer accountability, including the way that that the use of force by officers is reviewed and how officers are disciplined. A number of initiatives are underway to improve the police department's transparency and to encourage officers to actively engage with the communities that they serve. Ways to explore and implement constructive citizen inclusion in the department's disciplinary process remain under active discussion. And finally, we're investing in technology and infrastructure to modernize our police department. The BPD has begun retrofitting transport vans to improve safety for occupants as well as our officers, as well as installing recording cameras inside of our transport vans. We've completed a body-worn camera pilot program, and we continue to roll out cameras for all of the officers within the next 2 years. Much work remains to be done, and change will not happen overnight. But our efforts have started the necessary process of change and reform in Baltimore. They reaffirm the city's commitment to a police department that both protects our citizens as well as respects their rights. In this hope and expectation, I know that I'm joined by the City Council, and particularly our City Council President, Jack Young, who have supported our work with the Department of Justice to improve our police department. Again, I thank Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General Gupta for the Justice Department's recognition of our reform efforts. And I appreciate her acknowledgement of our extraordinary cooperation with the department as it conducted its investigation. I pledged that my administration would do everything in my power and our power to cooperate with the investigation. And we're pleased that as a result of our work together, the investigation has been completed in 14 months. And a very rapid pace for these rapid pace for an investigation of a police department of our size. We committed ourselves to working collaboratively with the Department of Justice, and we are grateful to have earned its trust. Our police commissioner, Kevin Davis, and his command staff and officers at every level have worked tirelessly to steer the police department on a path of true reform. And I'm confident that the findings report as a blueprint, as a blueprint and the partnership of the Department of Justice, I'm confident that the Baltimore City Police Department will become a model department for our country. Again, I want to thank the Department of Justice team. I want to thank my police department. I want to thank my staff and our council for the hard work through this process. We will continue to work together so that Baltimore can move as quickly as possible towards full-scale implementation of the recommended reforms. Over the next few months, we will put in place a concrete plan for change as well as concrete plans for a new culture for the good of the city, for the good of the police department, and for the good of the people the department protects. Thank you very much. Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, and good morning. First and foremost, I want to thank the mayor for her leadership. Change is painful, growth is painful, but nothing is as painful as being stuck in a place that we do not belong. It is critically important for me to say in my opening remarks that this report is not an indictment on every man and woman that has the privilege of wearing this uniform, this patch, and this badge. This report is, however, an indictment of those bad behaviors by a relatively small number of police officers over many, many years. There are officers right now that are just as offended as we are to see the details that are laid out in this report. Why? Because they wear this uniform proudly and they serve the citizens of Baltimore honorably each and every day. We know that our citizens are outraged at some of the details included in this report, and they should be. Citizens can't be expected to respect an agency if the trust of that agency is breached. There are several instances in this report in which that fragile trust has been breached. And some of the more egregious acts described in the report, action has been taken, and those police officers have been removed and no longer work for the Baltimore Police Department. Throughout this report, the DOJ commends Mayor Rawlings-Blake for her steadfast work towards reform in her police department. Are we there yet? Of course we're not there yet. But some actions have no negotiation attached to them. And that includes racial discrimination, sexual orientation discrimination, or any kind of bias-based policing or criminal misconduct by police officers. To the citizens of Baltimore, our professional men and women will continue to serve you. We will continue to go after those who are choosing to harm our communities with guns, with drugs, with violence, and with other criminal acts. But we will do it in a lawful and respectful way. It's done that way in cities and towns across this country each and every day, and quite frankly, it's done in Baltimore that way each and every day. Those who choose to wear this uniform and choose to blatantly disregard someone's rights absolutely should be uncomfortable, because we are not going to tolerate it. It's your actions that are fostering fear and resentment in our communities and making it extremely difficult and dangerous for the vast majority of honorable men and women who serve in our very noble profession. An obvious question that will inevitably be asked of me and the mayor and many others is, are we surprised by the findings of this report? The answer is quite simple for me. I'm very, very concerned by some of the information contained in this detailed report. I have no tolerance for any person who is privileged enough to wear this uniform if they choose to engage in racist, sexist, discriminatory, or bias-based policing. Without a doubt, we will become a model for the rest of this nation. I firmly believe that. We haven't just sat back waiting for DOJ to tell us about our shortcomings. We've worked to enact significant changes and reforms before we arrived here before you today. With our agreement and principles, we have already worked out with Justice a detailed roadmap for a path ahead. I'm looking forward to our partnership and moving forward with the Department of Justice. And as I said a number of times, this isn't something that we're doing to police officers in Baltimore. It's something we're doing for police officers in Baltimore. Mayor Rawlings-Blake has been wholeheartedly supportive of all the changes we have been implementing in the BPD. Without her support, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to change so many policies and enact so many initiatives well before this report was ever published. I can't thank her enough. I had the opportunity to live through a DOJ consent decree in the first police department that I worked for right here in Maryland. That agency served a population with demographics similar to that of the city of Baltimore. What I know is that we came out of that consent decree a better and stronger agency. Two immediate additions that I made to the Baltimore Police Department were bringing in two high-ranking members who have had experience working through DOJ investigations and consent decrees. Deputy Commissioner Jason Johnson, a former commander of internal investigations, and Director Vernon Herron, a former Director of Public Safety, have worked hand in hand with the Department of Justice during investigations and consent decrees, and they will help us get better faster. We also stood up a DOJ compliance team under Chief Ganesha Martin well before the findings. This is something that is historically done after the findings. It's another unique thing with Baltimore and this DOJ investigation that Baltimore should be proud of. This will position us better to move forward and to address the concerns that have been noted. We are serious about making meaningful changes. That can't be lost in the details of this report. We are very, very serious and committed. Change takes time. Change takes commitment. And change takes trust. We will get there. We will get there together. We will be better. We will prove it to the world, to this city, that it can and will be done in Baltimore, and Baltimore will be the model for this nation. It will be hard, but it will happen. This is a moment to get better. It's undoubtedly a tough moment, but a moment we will be able to reflect upon in the future and know that this was a turning point for better policing, not just in Baltimore, but in our United States. I want to close by echoing something that the mayor says routinely. We are going to do whatever it takes to have a police department that our citizens in Baltimore deserve. Thank you. Mayor?
Yep. Thank you very much. We're going to open it up for a few questions.
Mayor, how much do you anticipate this report costing to implement?
So I first want to start by saying we're committed to making sure these reforms happen. And while we understand that Baltimore doesn't have a blank check, in order for those reforms to happen, there has to be a commitment to the dollars that it takes to make meaningful reform. We've seen in other cities where that can cost between $5 to $10 million annually. We anticipate that being the range, and we will. I have made the commitment to the Department of Justice, to my team, that will put the city in the position to be able to meet that anticipated expense.
Mayor, who is responsible for the police department being in this state? I mean, if you talk to the citizens of the city, who should be held responsible for the police department practicing these policies, which this report concludes are systemic?
They are systemic, and by the nature of your question, a system is not an individual. That being said, I'm responsible for ushering in the meaningful reforms that have taken place thus far, and I am certainly committed to making the meaningful reforms moving forward. The work that happened prior to the Department of Justice collaborative review, the work that happened prior to my request that the Department of Justice do a patterns of practice investigation, that work is sent a clear signal, I think, to the Department of Justice and to the country that we're serious about reforming the department. And that type of work isn't aided by pointing fingers of blame. It is aided by rolling up your sleeves and doing the very tough work that we are in the midst of in order to provide the citizens of Baltimore with the department that they deserve.
Ms. Gupta, where do things stand now with the city?
Sure.
One second.
If I could just add to that, I think it is, as the mayor said, the investigation that we conducted is focused on the systemic and structural deficiencies. And it is not we looked at a period of time at the police department, but the goal was not to cast blame or to figure out who to cast blame to. These are problems that have been long-standing in the Baltimore Police Department, and the goal now is to work with the kind of city leadership and the commissioner who've shown the proactive desire for reform to remedy what have been long-standing practices here at the Baltimore Police Department.
Ms. Gupta, where do things stand with the city now? Do you have an agreement to seek a consent decree?
So what we have today, and I'd urge all of you to look at it, is an agreement in principle that lays out the framework for our negotiations moving forward. What's going to happen in the immediate days and weeks ahead now is that the Department of Justice is going to be fanning out to speak with members of the community, members in law enforcement, to get their feedback about what kind of police department they want, what kinds of remedies people are seeking, and what is going to benefit the most to the Baltimore community and to Baltimore police officers. So we'll be spending our time doing that while also negotiating a consent decree with the city. And given the level of cooperation we've had thus far, we're anticipating our ability to move expeditiously to get that done.
This might have the opposite of its intended effect, at least in part, with a backlash against police officers that we have seen in other cities, and also the so-called Ferguson effect, where crime rates increase after police pull back, murder rates increase.
So, one thing I have to say that I think is really important is that throughout our investigation, we heard from police officers. We heard from the Fraternal Order of Police directly about their desire for reform, their understanding that they haven't had sufficient resources on the technology side, on the training side, on staffing shortages and the like. These are issues that the Baltimore Police Department isn't going to stop working, and the commissioner can speak to this more directly, but we heard directly from officers throughout the city about the desire for reform, because they are witnessing every day as they do the hard work of policing what happens when the level of trust is broken in communities, and it is only going to enhance officer safety and public safety and meet the needs of the Baltimore community to do this hard work of reform. And I fully expect that is ultimately going to result in the community and the Baltimore police officers getting the mutual respect that they deserve.
How does this report help reduce crime in the city?
The only way that we're going to be safer as a city is when the community and the police have a mutual respect and trust, and we can get the work of policing done. There's nothing that the community can do on its own to create the neighborhoods, the safe neighborhoods that we want. And there's so little that the police can do without the cooperation of its citizens. I've said all along that we have to figure out how we can repair this relationship, because that is how we will see a much safer city. We've seen crime go down, we've seen crime go up, we've seen under my administration the lowest and the second lowest homicide rate that the city has seen in decades. But at that same time, we knew it wasn't sustainable if we didn't have those relationships of trust. That's what this is about. We can't ignore the problems, and that's why I was so determined to make these reforms ahead of the Department of Justice investigation. And when it was clear to me that we needed to do more, I asked for this patterns and practice. We have to heal our city. It's not easy work. You know, while people say, well, who's to blame and what's the answer is we have to get through this tough work together. And I've made the commitment to do that tough work, not to sugarcoat the problems, not to hide, to sweep them under the rug, but to reveal very clearly what our obstacles are, what our challenges are. And I feel tremendously blessed to be at this place where we have the cooperation and the partnership with the Department of Justice that very clearly and objectively did the investigation, and the leadership of the police department and the rank and file in the police department and the command staff that's committed to getting this right for the citizens of Baltimore. So with those things in place, I know that we are laying the foundation for a much safer city.
Commissioner James, can Baltimore citizens expect to see a cleaning house in the next few months?
Well, let me just address that question and the previous question. Fighting crime and having a better, more respectful relationship with the community are not mutually exclusive endeavors. We don't have to choose one or the other. We're choosing both. It's 2016. So the Baltimore Police Department is choosing both. So we realize the necessity of the crime fight, but we also realize right now, and this is laid out in this report, the necessity to have a much, much better, stronger, legitimate relationship with our community. Now, in terms of cleaning house, I've fired 6 police officers in 2016 alone. That's a small number, but those who have left this agency deserve to leave this agency. So I'll continue to hold police officers accountable, and I do that as much to remove them from our communities as to ensure that the good police officers know that their leadership is paying attention to good policing. They appreciate that. Yes,
you
sir.
said you were very concerned about some of the things that you read in the report. Was there one thing that jumped out to you in particular that you were very concerned with?
Well, it's 163 pages, so I've gotten through it once, and I need to go through it several more times, but it lays out so many things that we have to work on. It lays out concerns about training, policies and procedures, discipline, and I know from my previous experience with the Department of Justice that they look very, very critically at our hiring, our training, our policies and procedures, and the way we hold police officers accountable. So it's all important to me. I don't rank or prioritize the contents of the report. I think it's all important to me because it's all important to our citizens.
Madam Mayor, can you talk about,
Mr. Burns?
can you talk about the other part of the system? Because the report talked about a systematic lack of housing, employment, educational opportunities. Can you talk about what you have done or what you are about to do?
On those areas?
Yes.
Listen, none of these problems that we have in Baltimore exist in a vacuum. And respectfully of your question, I would like to focus on the Department of Justice report and our principles and the guidelines of us moving forward. But the work that we're doing to revitalize our neighborhoods, that continues. I mean, Baltimore has one of the most highly regarded blight elimination plans in the country right now. We're about to start a new school year with a lot of optimism about the new leadership in the Baltimore City Public Schools that hopefully will redouble its efforts to bring educational excellence to all of the children of our city. we're working every day on ways to find employment and bringing our institutional anchor partners in the city together to the table to find opportunities for those in our city that are hardest to employ. That work continues. That being said, I don't want anyone to be mistaken. I'm not sitting around, and nobody is sitting around till we solve poverty before we make police reforms. No one is sitting around before we solve the issues of discrimination or poor housing or any of the challenges that Baltimore faces along with other cities. We're not going to solve all of these problems before we address the needed reforms. That push, that commitment to have meaningful reforms, to have meaningful court enforceable reforms will continue to happen.
What should we think about the results of the Freddie Gray case in light of this report? Did the justice system get it wrong?
Say that again?
What should we think about the results of the Freddie Gray cases in light of this report? Did the justice system
So I think it's a totally separate. I mean, one has nothing to do with the other. I mean, the Department of Justice, and I don't know if Ms. Gupta wants to speak to it, but the Department of Justice did a very objective and thorough report. And while I've said all along, that justice is a process, not a verdict, what I want to continue to reiterate to people is that the commitment to having a police department that our citizens deserve, that work will continue, and that has very little to do with the outcome of the cases. I don't know if you wanted to speak to that.
I mean, the only thing to add is that, our report is focused on all the systemic and structural deficiencies, not focused on any particular case. And the goal is that where there is trust, these kind of critical incidents, that triggering incidents that can happen, are ones where there is a bank of trust between the community and the police department and an ability to self-study, to examine and figure out where did things go wrong and what can we fix. And I think that is what I've heard the commissioner talk about, that's what I've heard the mayor talk about, and that's what we're focused on moving forward.
You have a question over here?
You've looked at a number of these departments across the country now, the Obama administration has, and I'm wondering, do these findings suggest to you that if you looked at any major police department in the country, you might find this kind of bias? We've seen Ferguson, we've seen Cleveland, now Baltimore. What does this report say about the state of policing across America?
So, I mean, I think there's no doubt that there are a lot of challenges in between community and police departments around the country. I think that what we find is when we issue one of these reports, we hear from chiefs and supervisors that are reading and digesting these reports to kind of self-evaluate and understand what they're seeing in their own police departments. Every one of our reports, though, is different. We spent a lot of time, we spent the last 15 months deeply engaged in Baltimore with the community, with police officers. Ferguson dealt with a separate set of issues on fines and fees and the issue of revenue generation on public safety. Here we were looking at a different set of issues. But look, there's no question that these are challenging times in policing and in police community relations, and our hope is with all of the resources that the Justice Department puts out, including through our findings reports and our consent decrees, that these are resources that major city police departments and small and mid-size can actually learn from and do self-evaluation.
Are the problems worse in Baltimore than anywhere else?
I can't say that the problems are worse or better. I think every police department has its own set of challenges and history and demographics and the like, and it's why at the Justice Department we don't have a cookie-cutter investigation or a cookie-cutter set of findings. We spend a lot of time understanding the dynamics in the jurisdiction that we're in with the police officers and the community, and that, I hope, is really reflected in this report as well.
Last question, Jeff.
We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in Baltimore in the 6-year period on consultants, reports, studies, and advisors, and new commissioners, and did all of this just get overlooked?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think what Ms. Gupta is saying is accurate, and what the report says is accurate, which is that the work, the meaningful work to reform the department was ongoing. But it was clear that it was insufficient, and that's why I was very determined to get the Department of Justice in with the patterns and practice investigation so we could get reforms that stick. reforms that the very deserving communities who want better for their neighborhoods, want better for themselves and for their children, so we can get the reforms that they deserve. And that's what this is about. Nothing, and I don't think that any effort to be better should be seen as wasteful if that one effort didn't fix the problem, because this is a very complex set of challenges that we face, and it's not going to be easy to reform the department, and it's not going to be quick. But I'm committed to putting the resources on the table to get this done, and I know that we have a department that is committed to being its best.
I'll just one quick thing, which is that our investigation considered and reviewed a lot of those reports, probably all of them. And so these are things that have been built in and understood into our investigation as well. But the difference that we have here is that moving forward, when we get to an agreement, it will be an agreement, a court enforceable agreement, which helps sustain the commitment to change, regardless of who's in any of our positions, and will be independently monitored by a monitoring team. And I think that just helps build in and ensure sustainable reform over the long haul.
Thank you.